to arrest the perpetrators or would-be perpetrators with cameras running and be heroes. And somewhere, somehow, it went wrong for them.
So to be clear, where does the information on Pat Kahn come from, and is there anything in the public record?
There's nothing in the public record that I know of. It's all from the Freedom of Information Act materials that I've obtained. But that's a marvelous story in itself, because I had been leaked these documents, and I filed a Freedom of Information Act request saying I want all documents linking Richard Guthrie to the bombing, Tim McVeigh and others, and to this white supremacist compound in Oklahoma called Elohim City. Well, of course, the FBI comes back and says there are no such documents. So I sued to get them. And I had the documents. The FBI did not know that I had these two memos. The FBI also didn't know that I had a affidavit already from a retired FBI agent who said these memos were not frauds or fakes, they were real. And it came from the FBI director. And while the FBI is very powerful, it has one weakness that you can take advantage of. The Bureau, as they like to refer to themselves, will always lie, even when the truth serves them better. So I knew they would lie to the judge. And they did. They came back and said there are no documents. And so I produced those two documents. I knew they'd come back and say that there were frauds or fakes, which they did. So I filed the affidavit from the retired agent. And the federal judge went ballistic on the FBI, and he ordered a manual search. And he said, I want all documents showing a link between the FBI, the sting operation, Elohim City, and the destruction of the Murrah building and the murders of 169 people. They immediately rushed back and tell the judge that we can't do this, Your Honor. We have informants whose names will be disclosed. It could involve their lives if it gets out that they were involved in this. And the judge says, black out the names, turn over the documents. And they came back with something like 400 or 500 pages of documents dealing with this sting operation. But the earliest document was dated on the afternoon of April 19th, 1995, which was after the bomb went off that morning. And so I go back to the court and I say, Your Honor, this is ridiculous. There's no way this sting operation sprang suddenly to life 2 hours after the Murrah building had been blown up. It had to have been in place prior to that time. And the judge agreed. And he said, what would you like to do? And I said, I would like to go take the deposition. Excuse me. I told the court I would like to take the deposition of Terry Nichols. I had already been able to get in to see, and I'll never know how I was able to do it, but to see Terry Nichols, and I had spent a day and a half with him. Nichols wanted to tell the truth about the bombing. He had been convicted in federal court, given a life sentence in federal court, but not the death sentence. And the jury essentially said, it's clear to us that there were other people involved, and we do not understand why the federal government's not going after him. So we're not going to give Terry Nichols the death penalty. Nichols was retried in state court in Oklahoma for murder. Same result. The jury came back guilty, but we're not going to give him the death penalty because it's clear to us that there were other people involved, and we don't understand why the state of Oklahoma or the federal government have not pursued them. Well, after this happened, Nichols could not be retried. He could only be tried for the crimes in state court and federal court, and once he'd been tried and the verdicts were rendered, they couldn't try him again. So Nichols writes to then Attorney General Ashcroft, and he tells the Attorney General, come and see me and I'll tell you all about the bombing. I'll tell you who was involved. I'll even tell you the government informants who were involved, and I'll lay it all out for you. Now, you would think if you're the Attorney General of the United States, even if you don't think Terry Nichols is going to be truthful, you would at least want to know what goes through the mind of somebody who does something like this, who has this kind of animosity towards the government. But not only does Ashcroft not go see Nichols or send anyone to see Nichols, he issues an order that the media is to have no contact with Terry Nichols. So here I have an order from a federal judge saying, you go take Nichols' deposition and do it on videotape. Well, the FBI immediately ran to the Court of Appeals and had that order set aside. And you have to wonder why. Why would the FBI be so concerned about Terry Nichols telling the truth about the Oklahoma City bombing?
And as I understand, Congressman Rohrabacher had been part of a committee that had been investigating possible foreign connections to the OKC bombing, and he had talked to Terry Nichols, but Terry Nichols had declined to talk to him a second time?
What happened is the federal government would not allow Congressman Rohrabacher to meet alone with Nichols. The FBI had agents present in the room. And
which kind of defeats the purpose, I suppose.
It certainly defeats the purpose. Because Nichols had told me that the detonators used in the bombing had come from a person who was working for the FBI. So there was Nichols, as he told me, he did not feel free to talk when you have FBI agents standing there in the room, when you specifically asked, and the congressman asked, to meet alone with him. And Rohrabacher eventually issued a report. It was a scathing report about the FBI. He had tried to subpoena records. He'd asked for access to witnesses, and they literally told him to go pound sand. They weren't going to honor his subpoenas. They weren't going to give him anything. And of course, there was not enough support on his committee to back up his subpoenas. And it all comes down to politics. I mean, whichever party it was did not want that story out there, so they're not going to back up the congressman's effort to get subpoenas honored that had been served upon the FBI. But it was a horrible situation when the FBI looks at a subpoena from a congressional committee and says, shove it. We're not going to obey this. We're not going to give you access to people who have knowledge about the Oklahoma City bombing. We're not going to give you any records.
So then how many times did you meet with Terry Nichols, and how many depositions did you take?
I took no depositions because the federal court, the FBI went to a higher court and got an order setting it aside, the order that I had allowing me to take the deposition. And so I spent a day and a half with him, was never able to take his deposition, which is, as I said, the only thing he wanted to do was to tell what happened in the Oklahoma City bombing, and more importantly, the others involved, to identify them. And the government has fought me for years to keep that from happening.
But you have managed to get some of the information that Terry Nichols told you out to the public.
I have, and I've gotten some of the documents through FOIA requests that are incredible documents. It was not only this operation, this paramilitary white supremacist compound in eastern Oklahoma known as Elham City. The